Hello everyone and welcome to my latest video, What's Wrong with the Spiritual Industry? So first off, the spiritual industry, in my opinion, is fucking boring. Everyone is so serious, everyone is so dense. Here's the thing, that when you actually move into levity, humor, when you actually move into comedy, that actually becomes the integration. So if we're so dense and heavy, something's not actually fucking integrated. Because when we actually move into a space where we actually feel in the radiance of God, we feel light. We feel we got like angels that are fucking blowing on our face. You know, it's kind of like you got those rosy cheeks, like, you know, you were just fucking fucked by God, like those rosy cheeks, like you feel light. You know, you feel full of ease. Like, for me, whenever I'm really integrating something, when I'm really integrating something and I've jumped a bunch of timelines, that's when I get funny. That's when the comedy comes. That's when my vessel just, I want to play. I want to laugh. And so the spiritual industry is too fucking serious. They take their little self-righteous little cacao ceremonies, their spiritual disciplines and spiritual processes too fucking seriously. Because when you actually integrate, you move into a space of humor and laughter. Because if we're not doing this work so that we can be in more joy, what the fuck are we actually doing this for? And so one of the things that I really think is wrong with the spiritual industry is that it's too serious. That we can't say fuck, that has to be politically correct, pronouns, all this shit. God is wild, unleashed, uncaged, sacred life force energy moving through our body, right? It's not this really defined thing. God is a gangster. God is comedy. God is humor. Secondly, what I find wrong with the spiritual industry is that, again, it is so dark and it is so dense and heavy. Too much shadow work. So shadow work is important. I've made videos about shadow work. We need to look at the aspects of ourselves that we project. We need to look at the aspects of ourselves that maybe we're triggered about in other people. We need to look about what makes us difficult. We need to look at our woundedness in our little boy, but we don't want to stay there. Sometimes in the spiritual industry, it's so much about the darkness, and we're always processing, always be processing. It's this continuous shadow excavation, more and more and more, that we don't actually get to a place of the comedy, of the levity, of the ease. So if we're doing shadow work, but we don't want to live there, and if we're living in the shadow work, something is not actually integrating, and somehow our self-righteous spiritual ego gets off on all the processing. Look how evolved I am. Look how much work I do on myself. I'm excavating my shadow. I'm processing. I must be an enlightened human being. I look at this sometimes as a form of stagnation, that we're stuck and lost in translation, that something's not integrating if we're stuck and living in shadow. Because when we truly move through the darkness, then we're able to integrate and move into more levity. We're able to move into more ease, to more flow. Let's make more fucking dick jokes. Let's play. Let's not take our shit so seriously. It's the cosmic joke. The cosmic joke is that you're not actually evolved if you take yourself so serious. You take your process so serious. Shadow work is important, but we don't want to live there. We want to integrate whatever we're working through in order to integrate to comedy, to levity, to radiance, to humor, to play, to joy. Someone is actually integrated when they can hold their radiance, when they can hold levity. So when someone's actually feels like they have the gospel of God moving through them, they feel light. They don't feel like a wet fucking paper, like a wet blanket of this heavy, just, this fucking sludge. We move through the shadow. We move through all the ancestral energy to move into more levity, more play. So comedy and lightness, energetic lightness, is actually the integration. So if we take our shit so serious and everything feels dense, dark, and heavy. Something's not integrated. Our spiritual ego is getting off on our processing, that somehow we must be superior or evolved if we're always processing. No, you're stuck in stagnation. Something's actually not integrating. Because yes, the darkness is important. You need to be able to hold your dark to truly be able to be in the light without it being a bypass. But if you stay there, if you stay in shadow and you stay in darkness, there's something you get. Actually, you can't actually hold the comedy, the laughter. You can't actually hold the joy. You can't actually hold the levity. So think about that. We're stuck in shadow. We're taking our shit so seriously. It means we can't actually hold ease, flow, levity. We can't actually hold God. So our interpretation of spirituality is shadow work and taking our stuff really serious when we actually can't really hold the thing it is that we ultimately seek in life, which is to feel more joy, more play, which is to feel light in our physical and energetic and emotional body. And the third thing about what pisses me off about the spiritual industry is that it's become this recreated form of the matrix. Spirituality is so free, but then there's this way that we have to abide by a spiritual discipline, a spiritual practice. Spirituality has to look a certain way. It's not what you want to do, it's what you should do to purify your body and vessel. Oh, don't drink, don't smoke a cigar, don't do all these different things. Spirituality doesn't have to look anyway. It's what do you need for your body and vessel to move into the highest integration of your body and your spirit and the orchestration of your soul in this lifetime. Spirituality in the spiritual industry has become its own sort of regurgitated, recreated form of the matrix. And what happens when people come into the space, people like me who are tapped in but are not really of the spiritual space, that it threatens the spiritual ego, ways that they're still holding on. So often what happens with people is they live a certain way and they transfer maybe those addictions into this spiritual practice and spiritual discipline to hold on so tight that everything has to look a certain way. God should feel uncaged, unbound, sacred life force energy. God should feel like wild life force energy moving through your body. It shouldn't feel so contained, so controlled, and have to look a certain way. We have to do this practice, that practice. We have to look like we just got fucked by a tree at any moment. We have to have these whatever ceremonies all the time. What happens is when you actually channel God, you become the church. You become the ceremony. You become the meditation. You become the prayer. You become the shrine. You become the everyday walking cathedral. It doesn't have to look a certain way. It just lives and moves through you. Spirituality has become its own form of the self-created matrix. And what happens when people don't need it to look a certain way and they allow sort of the gospel to come back into the people and to move however it needs to move through them, it threatens people who have now created this predefined ego-controlled environment of how spirituality should look like. It becomes these glorified high school dynamics, these codes of abundance, and having it to look a certain way, which is all bullshit. Spirituality is your process to continuously die and be reborn within yourself, to surrender and let go and be born anew constantly through an alchemized creation in your body. That's what a spiritual life means. That's what a spiritual way of living means. You're constantly dying, constantly being born, constantly dying, constantly being born, which means that you've allowed your ego in ways that you hold on to control. You've allowed those to eradicate and move through your body, to surrender to the divine orchestration. Spirituality has become, the spiritual industry has become this self-created form of the matrix. So this is what pisses me off about the spiritual industry. Too much shadow work. Everyone takes themselves too fucking serious, and it's become its own self-created form of the matrix. And when disruptors, when rebels, when innovators and visionaries come into the space who have the transmission of God moving through them, but don't abide by having it to look a certain way, it threatens the box of how they've defined spirituality. that you need to do this to be a spiritual person. You need to do this to be a conscious person. When really what's going to happen is now creativity and the transmission and revelation of God and the divine is going to move through people in their own unique way, that is going to threaten people that have confined spirituality to this righteousness of ego, to be love and light, that to be love, that it has to look a certain way. It also pisses me off that the spiritual industry is always about just this love and light shit. It's all just heart chakra. Yes, it's important to be in our heart, but we also need to have anger. We need to have rage. We need to be able to be in the full spectrum and fluidness of the human experience. And sometimes when it's always about heart and having to look a certain way, we're afraid to disrupt. We're afraid to be opinionated. We're afraid to express. We're afraid to ruffle anyone's feathers. We're constantly worrying about politically correct shit. Is this going to trigger someone? What is it going to do? Rather than just allowing the revelation of what needs to come through you to come through you. Allow it to land where it's supposed to land and influence who it's supposed to influence and trigger and disrupt who it's supposed to trigger and disrupt. I don't like this love and light that everything just needs to be about love. Always love. That's not loving. Fuck that. I want to bring some of the swagger. I want to bring some of that fight game energy into the spiritual space, where you can lead with fire and you can allow the full spectrum of the human condition. That's what we're moving into, where the divine realm is going to move into the human realm. We're going to have a divine experience here in the 3D flesh, and it is going to disrupt and trigger the spiritual paradigm and the spiritual industry of those who are in continuous shadow work, who are dense, who are not able to integrate, to move into the joy and levity and the calmity, who are so serious and need it to look a certain way. The revolution is fucking coming. This is what pisses me off about the spiritual industry. And that's why we're fucking gonna change that shit.